It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.
George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
Having already depressed most of the British people, the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, is about to announce plans to change our weather for the worse. Yes, he's going to blot out the sun in Britain in the interests of global warming, though we ourselves don't actually have any global warming. It's almost May and everyone's still got their heating on. Well, the Pope in Rome lies in repose in the Basilica at St. Peter's, and a very magnificent and holy sight it all was as the litany was read of the names of the saints. I almost got carried away with emulsion. It's the only thing I've seen the BBC do right for a very, very long time. Maybe they can only do weddings and funerals now. And the deep schizophrenia of the Donald Trump administration is actually now careering between America first and America last. It's all coming up over the next 2 hours. It is the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
This greenery, wokery and quackery has gone so far that the British Prime Minister is set to announce solar dimming. How that fits with all these solar panels that they have been paving the countryside with, I have no idea. We are going to interfere with the weather. I don't have time to dwell on it this evening. There's so much else happening, but let me make a prediction to you. Nothing will bring the British people more powerfully together than the worst ever, most unpopular ever British Prime Minister conspiring with science to make Britain an even duller, less sunny, rainier place. That's my prediction, and if I can, I'll be doing my best to bring the coalition together in support of it. The candidate that I tipped to be the next pope is already now the bookies' favourite. These two things may or may not be coincidental. The Secretary of State, whom I have met, Pietro Parolin, Peter the Roman, he will become known as, I'm sure, is the bookies' favourite now to get the mitre hat. And it's said that his papacy would be effectively Francis 2.0, which is good enough for me, as I think you probably already know. The Pope's sudden and unexpected death shocked people inside the Vatican. That I know for sure. It's obvious that he had been ill for some considerable time, but he was out and about on the Pope mobile on Easter Sunday, but by the next morning he was dead. I'm also rather puzzled about the bruising on the left side of his face, but that might be because I've seen a movie or two about these kind of things. That might be because I'm old enough to remember what happened to John Paul I. But I'm not setting that hair running, at least not tonight. The passing of Francis has, I think, demonstrated the enormous advance that he led for the Roman Catholic Church in the world. Membership is up, attendances are up across all continents. Absolutely no one can deny that. The TikTok generation would appear to have concluded that being Catholic is chic, and that can hardly be a bad thing. But the passing of Francis is the end of an important era, the end of an important papacy. Again, I don't have time to deal with all of the ecclesiastical stuff, and there are indeed controversies to be had there. It seems the only interest that the Western media have is in sexual politics, gender politics, the LGBTQ++ agenda, and whether or not it is blessed or not blessed. I'm less interested in those things, as again you know. What I'm most interested in is the deep connection that Pope Francis made and sustained right up until the very end with the people of Gaza, with the people of Palestine. It's quite an extraordinary thing. I've lived through a number of popes. I didn't live at the time when the Catholic Church did not recognize Israel. I didn't live, really, when the attitude of the Vatican towards Israel was a very, very, very different one than even it is today, where Francis is being accused of being an anti-Semite. There wasn't much doubt about the anti-Semitism of previous popes in times gone by before my era. But the Israeli government is being urged by powerful Zionists in Israel and in the United States not to attend Francis's funeral because he's anti-Semitic. What do they mean by anti-Semitic? They mean that he loved the Christian Semitic people of Palestine. They mean that he was on the phone, the Pope in Rome was on the phone to Gaza every single night at 8 p.m. to the Church of the Holy Family in Gaza to inquire as to their health and well-being. And this he kept up from the bed, which became his deathbed. The Palestinians, and indeed the liberation movements and resistance movements all over the Muslim world, lamented deeply the passing of Pope Francis because they felt that he cared about the people of their region. And it's undeniably true that he did. And whether the next pope will keep that up, well, that obviously depends on who gets the gig. My guess is that Peter the Roman, if he gets the gig, will maintain the foreign policy of Pope Francis, which is the reason I'm hoping he gets it. But there are strong claims from other, particularly Cardinal Robert Serra from Africa, the Cardinal from the Philippines, even the Cardinal from Palestine itself will have their hat in the ring. But I think that Parolin will get it. There's a lot of people saying that you should avoid meeting J.D. Vance because after the infamous J.D. Vance handshake, anything can happen to you. I'm myself not concerned about that. I just mentioned that the last person whose hand he shook was the Indian Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi. I hope no harm comes to him. Although the declaration by Modi today that they are breaking the Indus Water Treaty, negotiated as long ago as 1960, may presage a very great storm to come in the region. It's very hard to know why the Indian government has done that, and we'll be keeping a watching brief on what happens next here on the mother of all talk shows. Now, I said earlier in my menu, if you like, that the Trump administration is careering wildly from left to right, from America first to America last, and it's difficult to know where this careering around is going to stop. Let me deal with that which Trump is getting right first. He said he would bring about an end to the war in Ukraine, and he's definitely doing everything that he can to do so. And the Continuity War Party of the European leaders and President Zelensky actually broke down in farce today in London, when London called a conference of the war party and the Americans pulled out of it, would not allow their senior officials to attend. The Germans and French then pulled out, and then the British pulled out, even though the conference was theirs in Britain. It ended in farce. And that is, I suspect, how the Zelensky presidency is going to end. After all, if Zelensky could not win the war with full, total, unqualified, unequivocal American support, he can hardly win with the Russians having now the warmest possible relations, warmer than anything seen, probably at any time in history, between the governments in Moscow and in Washington. Now, again, might not last, but when I saw the rather magnificent portrait of Donald Trump, which President Putin gave as a gift, painted by a Russian painter, and now definitely bound for the Oval Office wall, it's too magnificent not to be, I realized how deep and fast these relations are moving. The fact that little Marco Rubio, who, if he could, would be spitting only hate at Russia, is having to spit the exact opposite direction at Zelensky, blaming Zelensky for the state that we are in, and threatening to simply walk away from the war. And as I've said here before, without American weapons, without American intelligence in particular, without American satellites beaming the whereabouts of Russian forces, their movements, beaming the flight of incoming Russian missiles and drones, the Ukrainians will be literally at the mercy of the Russian armed forces. And that's the power that the Americans have. The role that they have played cannot be replaced by Belgium or by Holland or by Iceland or by Norway, and definitely not by Britain, where troops are leaving the British Armed Forces at a record rate of numbers. Nobody wants to fight for Keir Starmer, the sun dimmer, the solar dimmer. He's dimmer and dimmer and dimmer every day on domestic and on international affairs. And no self-respecting British soldier wants to die for Kupiansk and on the subject of which line it shall lie on, behind or in front, when it's been in 4 countries in the last 100 years, no British soldier wants to die for that. No British soldier wants to die for the anti-democratic, anti-theocratic dictatorship of Volodymyr Zelensky. These are not my words. These are the words of his former close cabinet, ministerial and military colleagues. There's a coup coming in Kiev. Trust me on that. And the next fight that Zelensky will be putting up is against the nurse trying to put a straitjacket upon him in some psychiatric ward in some sunny part of the globe. These are my predictions. You can treat them as you will, and you can respond to them as you will. So Trump's doing everything that he can to bring about an end to the war in Ukraine, which is the reason why I was glad that it was not Kamala Harris, but he who won the presidential election last November, and only for that reason. I fully acknowledged over and over again that it would not be such good news in other parts of the world, and it has not been. But on the Ukraine front, which was, in my belief, the most dangerous front on the planet, the danger of World War III was greatest in the Ukraine, I'm glad to say that I've so far been proven right, and that the war cannot possibly last much longer. The latest American proposal, which I don't think will pass, won't be acceptable to either side. There'll be more battles, more territory have to be taken before this war comes to an end, particularly in Odessa, particularly in Kharkov. But the American plan proposes the complete cessation of sanctions on Russia imposed after 2014, which is a lot of sanctions. It's thousands and thousands and thousands of sanctions. Now, we're not there yet, but the fact that that is the American proposal means that America first will lift the sanctions on Russia, if only to get a mark, if only to get ahead of all competitors. So I let you know now, Donald, if you're interested in having better relations with Russia, you need to follow russiahouse.eu, established some years ago now by Gayatri and myself, and which I expect soon to be a busy house indeed, once the sanctions are lifted. I picked up my Russian visa, so did Gayatri. We are headed for Moscow to cover as broadcasters. Did you get that, Keir? To cover as broadcasters the victory celebrations that you should have been at. It's no small thing. The 80th anniversary of the great anti-fascist victory, led by the wartime alliance of the United States, the United Kingdom, and the USSR and China. It's no small thing to celebrate the 80th anniversary of the end of Hitlerism, of the end of Nazism, of the liberation of the death camps. It's no small thing to commemorate these things. And the fact that you have effectively made it a crime for me to attend it, well, you can take me to court when I return, if you've got the balls for it. Although whether you've got the balls was questioned in the House of Commons this very week by Kemi Badenoch, the Conservative leader. This in the wake of the Supreme Court ruling that a woman is an adult human female. You wouldn't have thought that a court needed to tell you that, but it did need to tell Keir Starmer that. He and David Lammy, who believed that a man could grow a cervix, and female leaders of the Labour Party who believed that a woman can have a penis, and the Prime Minister himself, Keir Starmer, who repeatedly said trans women are women. Well, now we know they're not. And although he admitted today that the Supreme Court ruling ended this argument, It didn't end the argument about why Britain had a Prime Minister who did not know what a woman was, who legislated so that men could masquerade as women, in toilets, in changing rooms, on track and field, in the ring, on football fields, and elsewhere. He didn't explain that, and he certainly didn't apologize for it. Now, tonight we have the Bishop of Jerusalem on the show to reflect not only on the close relationship between the late Pope Francis and the people of Palestine, but also to discuss what's happened to the Christians, not just in Palestine, but in the broader Levant and indeed elsewhere in the Middle East. It's a little known fact, I told you it on Sunday, but let me tell you again, that before the Nakba, before the catastrophe in 1948, virtually all of the Palestinians living in Gaza were Christians. Yes, that's why there's a Church of the Holy Family there. That's why the remnants of that once totally majority community in Gaza are still there and still keeping the faith. And we'll be talking to the legendary Colonel Daniel L. Davis, the host of Daniel Davis Deep Dive, for some kind of insight on where this Donald Trump presidency is going to end up next. He said that China would kneel, but it's him now that's kneeling. He said that China would call, then he begged China to call. Now he's calling China. He said that 145% tariffs would bring China to heel. He said today that the Chinese tariffs are going to be reduced, but not to zero. 5%, maybe, Donald. What is it with the administration in the United States that they seem to understand little about foreign policy and even less about economics? It's all coming up over the next 2 hours. It is the mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned.
You have to remember back in 2002, 2003, there was a wish by George Bush for regime change. That's what was driving him. Nothing to do with weapons of mass destruction, which of course didn't exist in Iraq. So they had to construct some sort of formula, some sort of cover story in order to persuade the British public that intervention in Iraq was right. Now, David Kelly, as an expert in weapons of mass destruction, knew that this was untrue. He knew that there were probably no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
That was a guy that could have brought down, the whole system.
I reckon you're chaff. You've been thrown up to divert our probing.
The Foreign Affairs Select Committee, that parliamentarian briefing, I think that was an indignity to him.
We saw it on the news, and my very first thought was shock. Oh my God, you know, this man is in the eye of the media hurricane. He should be protected by that at least.
You've got blood on your hands, Prime Minister. Are you going to resign over this?
I don't know the details of how Lord Hutton happened to be selected, but what was certainly the case is that he was the right kind of judge to use from the point of view of Downing Street and the intelligence services as well.
Of the 21 days of hearing, only one half of one day was spent on discussing the forensic aspects. That is disgusting.
We were given the Hutton report the day before it was published, but actually what happened was he went too far.
The events of 2003 were disgraceful ones in this country's history, and it's unfinished business. Those responsible for an illegal war, those responsible for the death of David Kelly, have not been brought to justice. There's been no inquest into David Kelly's death. There needs to be one. We need to make sure that those who behaved in a reprehensible way in 2003 are finally brought to book.
Now, you get that film and our earlier film, The Killings of Tony Blair. You're getting a pattern here on our Patreon, patreon.com/George Galloway. You get it free of charge, as well as other original content and some that we are just about to introduce. And you can enjoy chats with me directly in real time if you support us on Patreon. It's vital that we get your support if we're going to keep these shows going at the rate and the level that they are. Will there be a Russia-Ukraine peace deal this week? Yes or no? The editor optimistically asked, and quite rightly, people are voting in large numbers now that that seems unlikely. But I'll be asking Colonel Dan Davis in a minute whether there will be a peace deal at all, or whether America will just have to walk away. If you want to call the show, it's toll-free in the US and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in the United Kingdom and Ireland, 08081 965522, and the worldwide number is 0044 203 966 2625. Now, Daniel L. Davis has forgotten more about war and military things than most of the politicians in Washington, London, and everywhere else have ever known. He knows politics too. If there was any sense in the Trump administration, he'd be in it at a very high level. And one day, he may very well be, and I'm glad that while he isn't, we can enjoy his wisdom here on the mother of all talk shows. Colonel Davis, wonderful to see you again. If I may, let me start with where President Trump is getting it right, splendidly so. That is to say, trying to bring an end to the Ukraine war. Relations have seldom, in fact, I'm struggling to remember when, if ever, relations were as warm between Moscow and Washington. That's a truly miraculous thing, isn't it?
Well, it is in one sense, but I think it's only shown as being, really warm only because it's in contrast to the chilly relations, really in most of the rest of Western Europe and the United States, where it shouldn't be. That kind of temperature. There shouldn't be this big diversion, but unfortunately there is. And obviously the reason, partial reason, is because of the war going on between Russia and Ukraine. But in my view, that the reason why the relations are so chilly among the West is because, unlike Donald Trump, almost nobody else in the West in a position of power, with the exception of Robert Fico and Viktor Orban, are viewing the reality of the world, and instead they're clinging to this fiction that doesn't exist. And so when you have one group of people, and you must add Volodymyr Zelensky into that group, that is viewing the ground on the preferred Hollywood script that they would like it to be instead of the actual reality that it is. And then you have another group, which really right now is, and it sounds odd to say this, but Trump and Putin, who are seeing it as it is. Then you're going to obviously have a big delta between what the two sides are trying to get done. And actually, it's more like three sides here. But Trump does seem to be ready to say, all right, we have done everything that we can. We have tried to bridge the gap between the Western side. We've tried to bridge the gap between the Russian side. We're having some success over here, but we're not having success here. And therefore, I think that he is at the point now, and maybe by the end of this week, he's going to say, we're done. We tried to bring this together. If you don't want to go by the deal that we can work out with Russia, then Ukraine and Europe, you guys can figure it out on your own. We wish you the best of luck, but we're no longer going to participate. I think that's where he is at the cusp of being right now.
And that's why what I called the Continuity War Council in London collapsed in such ignominy today, Colonel, wasn't it? You can't have the West, where the United States has said no, we don't want to continue the war. We're not going to continue the war. And so they pulled Rubio and Witkoff out of the talks in London today. Then Germany and France pulled out. And we had the totally ignominious end of the British government, whose whose talks they were, itself pulling out of them and thereby leaving the Ukrainian delegation holding their proverbial. The ignominy of that is likely to accelerate the ending of all of this, don't you think?
Well, I do, and I got to say, it's just the latest embarrassing outcome that is so predictable. When you had the U.S. side signaling nothing but these are our terms that we're willing to discuss, and if you're not willing to do that, we're going to walk. I mean, how many times can you say that? And then why would you have this meeting that you think that the U.S. side is still going to come to and have a discussion to where maybe you can talk them into your side, and then be surprised when at the end of it that we say we're only going to send one medium-level guy, General Keith Kellogg, and our senior diplomats aren't going to be there. How can you be surprised by that? And then, like you say, to just scatter one after the other to fall off, leaving basically Volodymyr Zelensky, who earlier today made the statement that, oh, by the way, this whole issue about recognizing Crimea, yeah, it ain't going to happen. I don't want it to happen. So he's staying firmly in this fictional bubble. But the Russians are going, you can stay in that bubble because it's going to end up getting popped with a howitzer, or you can do it yourself, one or the other. But that's where this is going. And as long as they stay in that fictional version of what they wish were reality, I mean, this can only end worse for the Ukraine side than if they had agreed to whatever Trump and Putin can come up with. That's what is so crucial to understand. As ugly as this is, George, the only reason that we're at this position where it can be ugly now is because of the absolute unwillingness of the entire West, to include the Biden administration prior to this, to acknowledge reality. We have forfeited every opportunity to have a negotiated settlement that would have been more advantageous to the Ukraine side. Now that we're left with an ugly one diplomatically today, or this will eventually be a military victory with terms of surrender issued to the Ukraine side. That's where we're at right now.
So let's go hypothetical, Colonel, if you'll permit me. Let's say the U.S. side says, okay, we're done, we're out of here. We're going to make our own arrangements in improving relations with Moscow. There's a summit going to be arranged between the two presidents. We're going to unilaterally lift many of the sanctions that we imposed before after 2014. And the War Party, the Continuity War Council of the willing in the European Union, which is by no means them all, as you say, and even those who are willing don't actually have more than a paddle boat or two that they could lend to the expeditionary force. What happens then? Does the war continue? And how does Zelensky keep his forces at the front when everyone else is declared they're out of there?
Yeah, two different factors I want to discuss based on all that you just laid out there. Number one, earlier today, Vladimir Putin very powerfully signaled that they are moving forward and accelerating their capacity to both their defense industrial base, to expand their war-making capacity and their ability to sustain, simultaneous with a continuing evolution of their war-fighting doctrine and their capacities as formations, etc. They are signaling they are doing everything to take the military capacity they have now generated for the last 3 years, and they're going to improve it so that this year it's going to get even stronger, meaning they have no intention of ending this war here. They recognize that there's not going to be a diplomatic solution. They can see that there's, the gap is so wide, it's unbridgeable, so that they are signaling they're not even going to slow down with what they're doing militarily. And then on the second side of that gets far too little visibility from the perspective of the Ukrainian armed forces. There's one issue about how much can the Europeans do without us. It's minimal. It's a smaller percentage. It's not insignificant. It does have something, as long as European countries are willing to continue to bankroll themselves and get rid of their money and to deplete their stocks. They have the capacity. They can do it. But who's going to operate that stuff? Because if you take the Ukrainian armed forces right now and then you publicly tell them the U.S. no longer has your back, even nominally, you're now only with what the Europeans can do, then their morale which is already very, very low, will just sink. And I think that there will be a significant possibility that you'll see in Ukraine what we saw in Afghanistan when the U.S. pulled out of that one. After 20 years of supporting the Afghanistan military, when they knew that it was now just them on their own against the Taliban, they said, yeah, we're not doing that. And then they absolutely collapsed, making whatever deals they could with the enemy. And I think you'll see a similar situation here. Hard for me to imagine how, as a force, they'll keep fighting in the aftermath.
Well, me too, but I was only a boy soldier. You are a colonel, so it's good that we are on the same page on that. Let me turn to a more problematic area where Trump isn't doing so well at all. He launched this Liberation Day or Liberty Day or whatever it was called, causing total carnage in the stock markets of the world, including the United States stock markets. He was throwing out numbers, I mean, almost randomly, to see if they stuck on the wall of who was going to be tariffed what. I don't know how anyone was able to keep a list or a table of it. But the big enchilada was China. He declared trade war on China. And it hasn't gone well, Colonel. I've got to put it to you that way.
It hasn't, and this is, I got to say, this is puzzling. I just cannot figure out what the end state is, what the expectation was. What does he think it's going to work? What his advisors may have been telling him economically, because you don't have to be an economics expert to realize this is not going to end well, that you can't literally upend the status quo economically of the entire globe, not just China, but I mean, initially it was 185 different countries. And it's important to note, he didn't just end the rest of it and stick with China. He put a 90-day pause on it with everybody else, still kept it at its nominal 10%, and then it announced that there was 75 countries that we were negotiating with. Well, that means you have to have negotiations, and maybe they'll work, maybe they won't. This thing could end up still stay more chaotic, even among the Western countries and the other countries of the world. But man, that issue with China is a big one, because by all accounts, they are digging in their heels and they're saying, if we have to eat some short-term pain on this, and it will be pain for them, they have been unequivocal and accurate in saying, we will all lose with the trade war. We'll lose too, but everybody's going to lose, but we're not going to submit. I think that they're to the point now to where they're saying, we're done rolling over, we're done being what they consider to be bullied, and I think that they'll say, I think that we can take more pain than you can. And if they stick with that, and we don't get anything resolved relatively soon, and you see Trump's trying now, he's now kind of softening his position, but the question is China going to soften theirs? Because they may say, we'll either go back to where it was, or we're going to keep these tariffs in place. So now then it's a double-edged sword, and I'm not sure that the president knows how to navigate his way out of it.
And finally, Colonel, if you will, give us your reading on the current state of affairs in the Persian Gulf. If you judge it on words, then the negotiations are going quite well. They are continuing from Oman to Rome and more to come. But if you judged it on actions, like the actual disposition of U.S. forces in the region, the moving of battle groups, the moving of the B-2, and so on, and the big resupply job that's being done on and with Israel, you'd have to say that war is definitely not off the agenda, and maybe soon in the Persian Gulf. What's your take on it?
And I sure hope that's not right, but I mean, you had President Trump issuing out a truth social yesterday that said he was seeing eye to eye with Benjamin Netanyahu in all things, I think was the quote that he used, implying that that certainly includes issues with Iran. And we know for sure what Israel's unambiguous desire is, and that is to go to war with Iran and to drag us in along with it. Now, there is inside the United States a significant battle between two camps, and that is the one is this, I think the phrase used was a war continuance party. Well, we got some charter members of that deal that are lobbying really hard, both at the government level and at the retired general level, to do everything they can to compel Trump to go and use military means to, quote, solve the problem in Iran, which, of course, is, I think you know more than most, would just explode the problems. It wouldn't solve any. But he's got that big battle. On the other hand, there is, though, another group of folks that are viewing, I think more like you and I do, that it would be an insane thing to do. And I'm talking to some senior folks here, so this is not a minor issue, that are pushing back in the opposite direction, pointing out the cost to go in and using the military means in Iran to show that there's almost nothing that can be gained and a lot that can be lost. And so Trump seems to one day seem to be leaning toward the military side, another day he seems to be leaning toward the what I call the sane side and the logical side, but we don't know where it's going to go because, as you rightly point out, there are a bunch of B-2 bombers in Diego Garcia. There's attack jets, the A-10 attack jets that are in the region. There's 2 aircraft carrier battle groups that are in the region, and they're still there. So it's on a knife's edge, and you have the Iranian side saying, hey, we're ready to go to war. If you do, we don't want to. We're willing to negotiate, but it's going to have to be a give and take, not just you issuing an ultimatum. So it's very much a volatile situation. I don't know how it's going to end up.
Colonel, we must hope and pray that it ends up in a way that can allow us to continue to speak until you join the US government, as you surely will if they've got any sense. Thanks for joining us again. Colonel Daniel L. Davis, the host of Daniel Davis Deep Dive. I've appeared on it myself. It's a terrific show. Everyone should check it out. Now, after this quick break, it's Bishop Dr. Munib Younan, former president of the Lutheran Federation worldwide, and a man who knew Pope Francis, coming up after a short break. Stay tuned.
The airwaves. This savannah is a rigid dichotomy of fact and fiction. As Fisher says, the Twitter sphere where the slightest misjudgment can spell being cancelled. One species rules over the airwaves through its ability to adapt and survive in even the harshest environments. The George Galloway. The top cat in these parts, it is mostly active on Sunday evenings in Britain and mid-afternoon in the United States. It seldom roars during the day. Most notable for its wide variety of headdress, it protects these parts from the mainstream media. You can catch this fine specimen on the mother of all talk shows. Don't pick a fight with it. They've been known to bite back.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Now, a big thank you to tonight's top 5 donors who visited the MOATS.tv website, as I'm hoping each and every one of you will do in the course of the show or after it. Esmat El Sherbini, Marie Snowden, Maurice Thibault, Stephen McKenzie, and a huge thank you to Claude Allen, who is this week's biggest donor. A big thank you to all of the 5, and a big thank you to all others who have given to the best of their ability. Just £1, $1, €1. That'll do me. But you have to do that. Otherwise, you're taking a free ride. Become a MOATS donor tonight. Give what you can to support the show. It's really easy. The MOATS.tv website is swift and easy to use. You can use it in any currency, and you can use it as a one-off or as a recurring donation. Thanks in advance for doing that. Bishop Dr. Munib Younan, former president of the Lutheran Federation worldwide, knew the Pope and knows the Palestinians even better. And he joins us now. I'm very grateful to him. Dr. Munib, very good of you to join us. I'm sure, like so many hundreds of millions of people around the world, you're mourning the passing of a great pope in the round and a great pope in relation to Palestine. What's your take?
Thank you very much, sir, for inviting me. It's with profound sorrow and deep reverence that I mark the passing of His Holiness Pope Francis, a transformative spiritual leader whose unwavering commitment to compassion, justice, and peace inspired millions across faith traditions and geographical boundaries. I always called, Pope Francis, that he was, a prophetic voice that cries in the wilderness, and it emanates from the gospel of Christ. That is a gospel of love, not only for those powerful, but also for those who are marginalized, oppressed, occupied, colonized. That was the message of Pope Francis. Pope Francis was a beacon of moral clarity in a world often fractured by conflict and division. His courageous calls for peace, persistent advocacy of dialogue, tireless efforts toward reconciliation have guided the work bridging religious considerations with peace-building efforts globally. Throughout his papacy, he stood as an important voice against the forces of authoritarianism and tyranny, championing freedom and justice, even when doing so placed him at odds with powerful. Now, when you ask me about there is no pope who visited the Arab and Muslim world as Pope Francis. He wanted to show that religions can really have common values that can change the world. When he visited Iraq, he has promoted the Arab Christianity in the Arab world, which is an integral part of its society. When he visited the Emirates, he signed with the Grand Imam the human fraternity. When he visited Morocco, he has shown, that Jerusalem should be a city for the three monotheistic religions and not for one religion nor for one nation. When he visited, Jordan, and Egypt, he saw the close relationship between Arab Muslims and Arab Christians in the world. We are one nation. And when I speak on Palestine, and that's very important, Pope Francis was one of the global figures to speak out clearly and consistently about the suffering in Gaza. He never shied away from naming the humanitarian catastrophe unfolding there, nor did he hide his sorrow over the toll on civilians, especially children and women. His call for a ceasefire, the protection of innocent lives, and genuine dialogue were grounded not in political allegiance, but in moral clarity. For his bond with Gaza's Christianity community was especially poignant, beginning with the outbreak of the war, October 2023. Pope Francis, no other leader, neither religious nor political, made daily phone calls to the Holy Family Parish in Gaza City, offering spiritual support and solidarity. Even while hospitalized with a respiratory illness, he continued the practice without fail. His final Easter address, April 2025, last Sunday, he called for a ceasefire, release of hostages, and aid for Gaza. In 2015, the Vatican officially recognized the state of Palestine under his leadership on 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. He condemned violence from both sides, consistently advocating peace and accountability. He describes Israel's military action in Gaza as cruelty and questions their moral legitimacy. In 2024, he urged the international community to investigate potential genocide in Gaza. He condemned the killing of any person, and he received the children of the hostages and the families in the Vatican, and the children and the families of the Gazan who are killed and tortured and maimed in Gaza. You know, what I want to say, two important things. Today, our world needs such, leaders like Pope Francis. Pope Francis did not change only or transform the understanding of Christianity or Catholicism. He has opened the doors for the marginalized and showed that Christianity is always a servant. Is not a Christianity of the powerful, but the Christianity that serves humanity. And secondly, which is very important, Pope Francis has been a father figure for many people as a leader. And if we speak ecumenically, he opened the doors for everybody. For example, in 2016, Pope Francis and myself, as the president of LWF at that time, with the general secretary of the Lutheran World Federation, we together hosted, after 500 years of conflict, we have hosted a common service together where we thank the Lord for the faithfulness of the gospel in both churches. We repented for conflict that we have caused to each other, and we committed each other that we have to work together and speak positively and cooperate wherever is for the sake of serving humanity, serving Christ. And now, he has called on the 20th of May of this year. Unfortunately, he will not be there. He is now with the Lord. He called to celebrate 1,700 years for the Nicene Creed. And he has called the churches that now it's time to have a unified common celebration of Easter, following the Nicene Creed, as they have really the Nicene Council has really asked that we should have one celebration, of course, not two celebrations, one on the Julian character and one on the Gregorian. So, we will miss such a figure. And we pray that the Vatican and the Catholic Church will continue to have a leader, and other churches should learn that today a church leader is a servant, not a lord.
Amen. Wonderful monologue, Bishop, and many people watching this, and the vast majority of people outside not watching this, watching only the Western media, are virtually oblivious to the presence of Christianity in the Arab world. When I told people about the Holy Family Church in Gaza, some supporters of Israel claimed that it could not be true. When I told people about the holiest place I have ever been, Malula in Syria, they thought I was making it up. Many people in the West have turned their eyes away from the Christian communities under pressure and oppression and war in the Arab world, and others don't know that they even exist. How can we break out of that logjam?
Well, I think I would like to tell many Christians in the world to read their Bible first of all, to read Acts chapter 2 verse 11, where it says that the Arabs were an integral part of the 15 nations were in the first Pentecost. They got the Holy Spirit and we consented that from that time onwards. And secondly, we Arab Christians in the whole world have been an integral part of our societies. We are not dhimma, we are not a minority, we are not we are not a millah, we are an integral part of our society. For example, we Palestinian Christians are 1% of the total population today. People have immigrated, but our impact in our society is 30%. How? Through our educational, medical, social services. Do you know that we Christians have 296 institutions, and we are in Palestine the third employer after the PA and the UNRWA? What does this mean? So I think, there is ignorance, because some, I'm sorry if I want to speak politically, some they want to see the conflict in Palestine or in the Arab world, it's a conflict between two religions. And the conflict is not religious. You see, I am myself, I'm a Palestinian refugee. I continue to carry the card, you see, of UNRWA as a refugee from Beersheba. I never used it because the church embraced me and educated me to bring the gospel of love and justice in our world, and especially for the Palestinians. And I tell you, as you have said, and rightly so, I really appreciate what you have said, and not many journalists or not many, who understand that. Gaza used to be majorly Christian prior to 1948. How do I know it? My family, my grandparents, because Beersheba and Gaza are close. Anything what we wanted, we went to Gaza. When we want to marry, we went to Gaza. When we want to baptize, we went to Gaza. When we were only 30 Christian families in Beersheba, and our natural growth was in Gaza. So, I mean, people misunderstand that. We have to educate the world. The media has a responsibility to show that Palestinian and Arab Christians are an important, integral part of their societies, either in Jordan or in Palestine or in the Arab world. And we have to care that they continue not only to survive, but to thrive.
And finally, Bishop, have you a word for the Christian community in Syria in these difficult days?
First of all, my heart breaks when I see what's going on in Syria. You see, and we know that we are very sorry, first of all, that that in Syria used to be more than 2 million Christians prior to 2011. Today there are hardly 300,000. What I tell them, what is the message which His Beatitude, Patriarch John the 10th has said, Syrians are an integral part of Syrian Christians, integral part of the mosaic of Syria. And we will stay here, and we don't want to see another authoritarian regime. We want democracy, we want freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of expression. We want to see human rights are everywhere. We want to see a democracy that works. And we are ready to build, Syria with all other minorities and with all other, Syrians who are original and who wants to build Syria. What I tell the Syrians, don't give up. In Arabic we say sumud. Stay, be resilient. Stay and continue to work non-violently for what is right in order to continue to see a Middle East which really flourishes with a democracy that gives everyone their own human rights.
Thank you, Bishop. Very great honor to have, as it were, shaken the hand of the man that shook the hand of the Pope. And thank you very much indeed for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. Comments you can leave on YouTube. You can scan the QR code now and have your comment on the YouTube stream, which I'll read out if I can. Bishara Saraf said he didn't visit Syria, the cradle of Christianity, where Christianity now is threatened for its extinction. And MAG says no one comes close to the empathy Pope Francis showed to the Arab Christians. And Cynthia Hall says, religion interests me intellectually. I have a one-to-one with God. But Pope Francis caught my attention when he began his incumbency. I've admired him more every day since. It hurts without him. Amen to that, Cynthia. Abu Swalhe Musafir says, wonderful indeed, the monologue by Dr. Munib Younan. And Jack Klugman, great name, says, crickets from every Western Christian leader except the Pope, as the oldest sites in Christianity are destroyed by the IDF Einsatzgruppen. Let me take a quick break and then I'll be right back in a minute or so. Stay tuned.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special announcement. A big thank you to all our wonderful listeners, as the Mother of All Talk Shows podcast is now one of the most listened to political podcasts in the entire world. We are the #1 English-speaking political podcast in the Middle East, and in the last year alone have charted in the top 10 in podcast land in Pakistan, Russia, and China. Like, rate, and subscribe to the MOATS podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts to be a part of the fastest rising independent news show in the world.
You are listening to the Mother of All Talk Shows with George Galloway.
Well, our podcast continues to rock and roll. We're holding our chart position in India in the top 30. Just imagine how many podcasts there are in India, and we are in the top 30. We're in the top 40 in Switzerland, South Africa, and Japan this week. Now, you can download the MOATS podcast by scanning the QR code on your screen now. And, of course, you can also listen to the podcast on that famous MOATS.tv website I keep telling you to visit. And once you have listened, please don't forget to leave a review and rate it. It helps to grow the podcast and more people will know about it. Who better to provide fresh thinking and analysis on the role of America in the world, particularly in Africa, than the one and only Niko House, our regular political commentator and founder of the MCSC News Network. Niko, I really wanted to talk to you this week because it's a difficult subject, this, for me as a white man to raise. But I saw this House Negro, head of AFRICOM, a black African American, threaten to kill the great leader of Burkina Faso, Captain Ibrahim Traore. And it made me so mad I reached out for Niko House for a point of view on it. Did you see it? And what do you think of it?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, let me say congratulations, George, on all the success that you've been having. It's well-deserved. I mean, from the guests to the topics that you cover, I feel like it's not really that many people giving so much diversity. And I know that Piers Morgan is trying his best to copy you, but, you know, it doesn't quite hit the same when you're not as dedicated to the truth as a presenter as you are. So let me just say congratulations on that. And yeah, absolutely. I saw Lingley's comments about Ibrahim, how he's supposedly using the gold reserves to provide his own private security. And let me just say, first of all, that's not true. Second of all, if it was true, let's be honest, wouldn't it be somewhat justified considering the fact that they continue to make attempts on his life? I mean, they just recently made another failed attempt on his life. That's probably why they're upset and why they're now going out of their way to bring it to the attention of the national public, to try and create this narrative, not unlike what we saw happen with Libya and Gaddafi, because Ibrahim has had that type of impact in West Africa when we're talking about not only uplifting Burkina Faso, but then uniting West African countries like Mali and Niger so that they can combat Western imperialism and the NATO allies that try to oppress them.
Well, that's right. His own bodyguards were offered $5 million to kill him. Now, it's no coincidence that the money involved was dollars. The United States and France are determined to do to Captain Traore what they did to so many others. In Burkina Faso, to the great Thomas Sankara, in the Congo, to the great Patrice Lumumba, and so many other leaders that they have dispensed with extreme prejudice because their own interests were threatened by an African leader who's actually governing in the interests of his own people and not of the empire.
Yep. I mean, this is a guy in Ibrahim Traore who wears the same uniform every single day. Not fancy suits, just a casual military uniform. He has no type of luxury. No one in the government is permitted to live any type of luxury. You know what he has done with the gold in Burkina Faso? What he's done is nationalize 2 gold mines that would have otherwise been sold for actually far less than what they're making after he nationalized it. That money is going towards the people. And the reason that no one in the government is allowed to live a life of luxury is because until the people of Burkina Faso can live that type of lifestyle, legally, without corruption, then he believes that no one in Burkina Faso should be allowed to live that type of luxury, especially members of the government. He has created a tomato processing facility that's doing very well for the agriculture there. I mean, just over the last couple of years, he's made so many positive changes, and it's all come from internal nationalized movement. And by the way, has been able to do this while Ukraine and Zelensky, on the other hand, of course, with the help of the United States, have been trying to train terrorists to fight the military of Burkina Faso, because France couldn't do so and were kicked out after they tried to, they threatened Burkina Faso after Ibrahim took over, but it didn't work out, just like it didn't work out in Niger. And even though they've been combating terrorism that has been brought about by the United States and helped and funded by Ukraine, Zelensky actually bragged about training terrorists actually recently. He's still been able to carry out these economic measures to help the people of Burkina Faso. And it's been so inspirational. I think that, honestly, George, has been the scariest part. It's not just the success. If he was merely successful, then he would be a problem, and maybe it would be an isolated problem. They would probably try to take him out quietly, because we know they've done that with actually a lot of African leaders over the last maybe 6 or 7 years. They've taken them out quietly. But they're trying to make an example of Ibrahim, because Ibrahim has been so impactful as an inspiration to the rest of Africa. And they're worried that, especially in the current state of the world, that other African nations are going to realize they don't need the West. And I saw your quote. I saw your quote getting passed around on Instagram, actually. There were different reactions to it. And I said, I know, George, and I know exactly what he's trying to say. He's trying to say, believe in your own self-determination and be willing to fight the fight. Do not trade in your values or undersell yourself or your potential for these Western values that are just a facade. They're fugazi. They don't really exist. Africans have so much potential. They're so naturally good at everything. I mean, whether it comes to engineering, medicine, anything in between, they do so much more with much less. That how can you not believe in your own potential? And I was telling people, I'm like, he's telling Africans, don't sell yourself short. And I understand how the message can, be received the wrong way because of you being white. But I was saying it doesn't matter if he's white, he's telling the truth. Because I know other Africans like David Huyeden, who reports from Nigeria, who feel exactly the same way.
Yeah, I mean, what I was saying is that you're being foolish sending your children to study in the United States, not least because there's a very high chance that if they say or think the wrong thing, they'll be picked up on the street and unceremoniously deported. Why send your children to the United States? Build up your own universities. Get leaders that are ready to build up their own educational system. Captain Traore just abolished all education fees this week. Now it's free for every child in Burkina Faso to go to nursery, primary, secondary, and university. Free of
And they
charge.
had their uniforms.
Something...
They had their uniforms and their supplies provided to them.
Exactly. And a school lunch thrown in. None of which we've got, by the way, in Britain, and definitely none of which you've got in the United States. So, you know, that's my message. However, people have decided to take it. We stand, as Malcolm said, for justice, whoever it's for and whoever it's against. And we make no distinction of colour or race or creed in that. Let's take it back to the United States, if we can, Niko. I was making the point to Colonel Daniel Davis earlier that the Trump administration seems to be careering between left and right, America first, America last, careering between successful and catastrophic failure, with the ever-present possibility of the balloon going up and making all of our discussions OTOs because there won't be any world. He's done a good job on Ukraine. He's done a disastrous job on China. And he might be about to do the ultimate disastrous job on Iran. How do you make sense of that kind of volatility?
I'm going to be honest with you, George. It seems like he's not making policy decisions based on what he thinks is best for the United States, but perhaps on behalf of another nation. I don't know, maybe Israel, perhaps. I don't know. That's just, it's a wild guess. But I find it funny that you say that because I was watching another show earlier today and they were talking about how they have to constantly, they get their production ready to do a show and then Trump opens his mouth and they have to throw everything out right before they have to record. Because, for example, just like you said with China, he's been waving his the American flag, talking about we're going to put tariffs on everybody, 145% tariffs on China, et cetera, et cetera. And then what was it, yesterday or this morning, he came out and said, actually, it's not going to be 145%. We're actually going to come way down on these tariffs. And everything I just said yesterday is no longer relevant today. And that's been basically the summation of the Trump administration. Even when we're looking at the NIH, right? Okay. So the NIH, we thought that we're going to see a huge transformation, especially with the nomination of RFK Jr., except for he decided to put in raging Zionist as a director. And now if you participate in any type of protesting or boycott of Israeli products, they're going to pull your federal grant research funding for medical research. How are those two things even closely related? They're not. And it doesn't make any sense. It is directly in conflict with American interests. Because basically what you're saying is, like, if you protest genocide, we're not going to let you discover the cure to cancer. Like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, our friend Anya Parampil said that she was relieved when Kennedy got health because at least he couldn't bring Israel into that. But he has. He's made it a centerpiece.
He thought that, right? We all thought that. No, we thought that, but the truth is, Israel. But that also illustrates how scary the times we're living in actually are, because now Israel can even infiltrate the National Institute of Health, George. The United States, every single institution in the United States has been bought off by Israel. How can you claim to be America first when Israel is, if Israel was forcing the United States to make decisions that at least moderately benefited U.S. citizens, then maybe I can understand it. But even what we saw in that signal chat, George, let us know that at the very top, even Trump's officials know that those decisions that we're making don't directly benefit the United States. They're hoping that maybe they'll benefit us on the back end. But in the immediate future, materially, they don't have any benefits. Us attacking the Houthis don't benefit us. Us funding this genocide really doesn't benefit us. Even overthrowing the Syrian government, it might moderately benefit us, but it's not really benefiting us as much as it's benefiting Israel so far. Attacking Iran does not benefit us. Not at this moment, not the way people might think it will. It would probably start a war that we can't win. I've already told people, I've been in the military, people. I've been in the U.S. military. Anyone with any relative knowledge of operational knowledge would tell you, we invade countries we know we can beat. There's a reason we had to send Iraq to test Iran. There's a reason we keep letting, we'll let Israel do a pop shot at Iran, but then we'll tell them stop. There's a reason why after we assassinated Mossadegh in Iran told us exactly what they're going to do and then dared Trump to respond. Trump didn't respond. And it's because we cannot beat Iran, but Israel keeps testing them anyway. And it's going to be problematic for the entire world. And if Israel really does do an all-out assault on Iran, it will shake things up to the point where the United States will not be a superpower anymore. And that's going to be the consequences of the United States itself because it's refusing to stand up to Israel for whatever reason. I mean, we can go from probably from the Epstein files to just Zionism in and of itself. But the reality is, if we don't get Israel in check, it doesn't matter who's running the administration at the time. We're all going to suffer.
You mentioned the Epstein files. When are we going to see them? Didn't that woman that's in charge of that department boast that she was going to publish the list? Where is it?
A lot. Yeah, most of his administration from the Department of Justice said that they were going to release the Epstein files, all of the JFK files, unredacted, which we still haven't received all of them. And I don't know why we haven't seen the Epstein files. They said that they were going to comb through them to make sure that there wasn't any legal issues with releasing them. But the only legal issue that there could be is that someone powerful or a lot of powerful people are going to be on the list. But I don't know if they understand this, but that's why we all want to see the list, because we want to know who hasn't been punished. You can't tell us that both Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein were both guilty of trafficking underage children to powerful people and then being like, yeah, but no one else is guilty. That doesn't make any sense. And we know that powerful people are involved, which is probably why they haven't been prosecuted yet. And we know that if they release that list, and there are names on that list that are involved in foreign governments all over the world, then what we expect to see next are prosecutions. And they don't want to pursue those prosecutions, in my opinion.
Combing through them. There's a whole lot of combing going on. They've been combing through them for months now. Niko House, political commentator, founder of MCSE Network. Thanks as always for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. Thanks indeed. Will there be a Russia-Ukraine peace deal this week? Yes or no? 18,622 of you have voted. It's overwhelmingly no, by the way. But let's get to 20,000, then we can say it's a representative poll. Let's take a quick break, then it's your calls all the way to Gayatri's social media news roundup. Stay tuned. I defy anyone to contradict the point that I just made, that every person alive today was born of woman. So why would we say that the people in the labor wards, in the maternity units, are people who are giving birth? Why can't we say women? Why can't we say mothers? Why can't we say women who are breastfeeding, mothers who are breastfeeding? Why do we need to say people who are chest feeding? All of these words, and indeed all of the trend that you say you dissociate yourself from, of transgenderism, transmania, I call it, are all taking rights away from women.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Let's go to Blackpool, who wouldn't, as we approach the holiday season, to talk with Walter, who's always worth hearing. Go ahead, Walter.
Thank you very much, George, for having me. There are 2 points of interest in your monologue, which followed closely one to another. The first one was where you mentioned the urgings bordering on threats by Israel personalities against attending the Pope's funeral. Now, shortly after that, you mentioned the May the 9th celebration in Moscow. And by God, I wish I'd be there with you to celebrate it. But anyway, I don't know whether you've heard this, but the EU has threatened the Serbian president, Alexander Vucic, from attending that celebration at the risk of having Serbia's application to join the EU cancelled. It just shows you what a vindictively vicious organisation the EU is.
Yep. Not only that, they threatened the elected president of Hungary and the elected leader of Slovakia with similar condign consequences. And the people making the threats have never been elected by the people of Europe. This is in essence the reason why people like me and you were campaigning to leave the European Union. If you cannot elect and cannot remove the people who are taking decisions about your life, then you're not living in a democracy. Mr. Ben crystallized that point for us in relation to the EU. I've got to tell you, as someone who knows Serbia quite well, that they'll be doing Serbia a favor if they cancel Serbia's candidate membership of the EU. I don't think they ever want Serbia in any case in the EU. And if they did, Serbia would have to abandon everything that made it Serbia. They'd have to abandon their historic relations. They'd have to abandon their own territory of Kosovo, long occupied by NATO. They'd have to abandon the fact that you can smoke in outside a restaurant without someone coming along and putting handcuffs on you. There are many unique things about Serbia in Europe, and they'd lose every single one of them if they joined the EU. Last word from you, Walter.
Well, they might reflect that if it hadn't been for the massive sacrifices made by the Soviet people in the Second World War, they'd all be speaking German.
Indeed so. Indeed so. And a Germany that is threatening to, and I'm quoting them, once again take up leadership in Europe. Once again? Well, when was the last time? As that statement clearly and logically implies, there was a last time. Well, you decide. Thanks for that, Walter. A big shout out now to tonight's top 5 donors who've been on to the MOATS.tv website since we came on air. Ray Legault, Ernest Costa, Sharon McIntosh, John Fain, and Imad Bejani. Thank you all, 5 of you, very, very much indeed. And indeed, thanks to everyone who has already donated on the website or will do so as soon as they can after the show. Now, Robert is in Jamaica, and he wants to talk about Ukraine. It is the global university of the airwaves, after all. Robert, welcome.
Thank you, George, and once again, congratulations for the fantastic work you're doing. Unfortunately, not enough people are doing it. Keep it up. I wanted to discuss the collapse. I call it the collapse of the Ukraine-Russia peace deal, because it's about to collapse. And why will it collapse? One, the war was really instigated and planned by the Zionists using the EU to try and push weapons into which would threaten Russia. And of course, that's why Russia made their move. I'm not defending Russia. It's just a fact. The real reason is, and they don't care how many people die in the Ukraine, the real reason is the same thing they do everywhere. Weaken the Russian government in the end put in a puppet government, and then you control their resources, their oil, etc. And if you notice, the move spearheaded by the U.S., but at the behest of the Zionists, is to control all the oil in the world. When every country that they have an issue with, there's oil or gas there. And once that's done, God help the rest of the people. They'll be paying $10, $12 a gallon of gas. Now, we go to the next section, why this initiative will fail. First of all, it was pushed by Trump. For whatever his intentions are, it was the only good thing that I thought he would be doing. He didn't have the same intentions, obviously, with Gaza. He's now part of the genocide, whether he likes it or not. But for some reason, he pushed hard for that peace. There were two problems. One, eventually, it's clear he's controlled by the Zionists. And that's why Europe was so aggressive against him in making peace. Why does Europe not even want to discuss peace? Not even to discuss it. So I knew it was dead from there. But what's going to totally kill it now is that Trump himself has lost so much ground in the last couple of months because of his stupid tariff attack on China, which has given him a boxing lesson that he will, not recover from, in my view. He will have his PR cover it up, and they came to agreement, etc. But China canceled Boeing, they stopped buying beef, and they're showing America, we really don't need you. When they started this issue 7 years ago, China sold 40% of its goods to the United States. And the Chinese are smart. They don't talk, they act. They changed their strategy, went more to the world. China is now only selling 14% of their goods to the United States, and I think that's going to get less. The option that the United States will have, and the decision the Zionists will have to make, how do we stop China, not from being a threat to them, but from being an economic powerhouse? Well, they have one choice. The only way they're going to stop them is to go bomb China and destroy its infrastructure.
I'm certain a great call, Robert, and a tour of the horizon. They definitely won't bomb China. China makes the point, I think, as succinctly and beautifully as can be in the circumstances. They say, we know that the United States can destroy China many times over with thermonuclear weapons. We, on the other hand, are content that we can destroy the United States only once. That's all, after all, that it needs. Comments on the YouTube, Roger Boniface, 8086, says a fried egg has more chance of being a chicken than Russia agreeing to that Kellogg-Macron-Starmer plan. And St. John Smith says Zelensky already did a great mineral deal. He just bought a platinum mine in South Africa with our taxpayers' money. Oh dear, I hope that's not true. I hope South Africa didn't allow that. And Big Gator Caesar says if Trump had any guts, he'd tell Zelensky that he's on his own. Well, I think Trump's got guts, and I think he's going to tell Zelensky that he's on his own. Nikki A says Ukrainian soldiers went into Mali, West Africa, and murdered Malians and Russians. What did Mali do to Ukraine? Western media didn't cover this. No, they didn't. But I'll tell you what, there's a fantastic piece by Africa Stream that you must watch by my good friend, Ahmed Caballo, on who is exactly funding and facilitating these so-called Islamist fanatics in Africa. Where did they come from? And who wants them to succeed? It is a piece of brilliance. African Stream, Ahmed Caballo, I salute you. More comments. Question Anything says they are ramping up the divide and conquer strategy against black people via disinformation in the media against Traore. Well, I mean, I think they'll have to be up very early to get one over on Captain Traore. I have every confidence that he's taken all necessary precautions. And as Niko said earlier, he's an inspiration now to all of Africa. He's the head of a small country. But like Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso before him, he has lit a fire that is bright and illuminating throughout Africa of what Africa can be with the right kind of leadership. Let's go to Ecuador, where Jim wants to talk about Ukraine. Welcome, Jim. What would you like to say?
Hi, George. Can you hear me?
Yes, very clear. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, great. We discussed this before, but I think it's extremely important when it talks about Russia's unprovoked attack on Ukraine. As you know, the OSCE is no friend of Russia. It's the European organization. And according to their own data, 10 days before Russia entered Ukraine, they keep a record of the daily strikes that happened in February 2022. 10 days, and the average during the first 3 weeks was 40 strikes, 50, 70, and then 10 days before, it went from, let me just see, it went to 2,036. First there was 1,413 on February 18th, and 2,026 on February 19th and 20th. What does that mean? It means that Ukraine started, if you go from 70 strikes to 2,036, that suggests, to put it mildly, a full-scale war. So in other words, Russia was forced to enter Ukraine, and this is according to the OSCE data, which we discussed before. But the reason that I'm calling, because we have discussed it before, is no one ever mentions this. Even one of our friends that we most admire, like Max Blumenthal or Jeffrey Sachs and so forth, they never mention. And one of the things that's very important that I add this. During the first week and second week of February 2022, Jake Sullivan went on TV and announced that Russia was going to invade the next day or within 48 hours. Then nothing happened. The next week he said the same thing and nothing happened, which was very embarrassing for him. And I believe, I'm a retired detective, that was the motive. In other words, the whole Biden administration's credibility. This is their national security advisor saying this. And so they forced this war. And I think that's worth bringing up. It may be a minor point. You know, everybody talks about NATO pushing against Russia's border and the 2014 Maidan coup and all of that. And those are general things. But what I'm saying is, another point is, Russia may not have invaded had it not been for that exponential amount of attacks on the Russian-speaking population 10 days before they actually did. So,
brilliant call, Jim. As you say, you've made these points before, but you made them some time ago, and it's really important because this audience is growing and growing, and many people will not have heard our last conversation on this. The points that you make are unassailable. The OSCE is not just not a pro-Russian organization, it is the complete opposite of that. But it did have the daily task of compiling the data of fire coming in on the Donbass from the Ukrainian forces. And facts are shields that win a ding. Facts cannot be changed. And those facts very clearly point to the imminence of a massive invasion on the Russian people of the Donbass by the regime in the Ukraine. Thanks very much for that call. There's a legend on the line, Simon from Weaponized News on the Ukraine peace talks debacle today. Simon, I mean, you'd have to have a heart of stone not to laugh at what happened in London today. Am I right?
Indeed. And greetings to you, Mr. Galloway, and to your worldwide audience. Well, in all seriousness, Sir Humphrey of Yes Minister fame, just 30 minutes ago, put out a press announcement from the peace talks, and this is a direct quote, not made up, as funny as it sounds, saying that significant progress has been made on reaching a common position towards the next steps. So I think we can all take from that as much joy as we wish to, sir.
Absolutely. Now, what happened? The Americans pulled out, but why did the Germans and the French pull out?
Because none of them wanted to be the handmaiden of failure. We only like to seize all the credit for success, of course. And it had been known that Zelensky was most determined not to literally recognize, I say that in a legal sense, the Russian ownership of Crimea. And that was obviously going to be a massive stumbling block. In fact, indeed, it was 0.1 of the elite peace Trump plan as exposed by the Daily Telegraph, who you may rely or not rely upon. And so right from the get-go, if they were going to start working down the agenda of the points that one was hoping they would agree upon on Friday after the US-Ukraine Minial Agreement version 2.0 was due to be signed, it seems that indeed nothing has been pulled out of the top hat, no rabbit, no squirrel, and nothing resembling either of the previous two, despite it being Easter. And so that's why most of the great and the good, apart from the Ukrainian Presidential Office Chief of Staff, their defense minister and their foreign minister, had to sit down with a few lowly bureaucrats and General Kellogg, who was doing his usual flip-flopping between the hard man and the man delivering the bad news to the Ukrainians. But meanwhile, as your previous callers revealed, we've had Zelensky going on a pre-G20 begging trip to South Africa. You know, you're desperate when you're begging the South Africans, who are having even more trouble than Ukraine keeping the lights on. But they seems that the rest of the world is not paying much attention to Ukraine. We've had the Iranian foreign minister, fresh back from his visit to Moscow, now on a trip expressly at the invitation of the Chinese, who then described him as their top counterpart in the Middle East, which must have come as a bit of a surprise to the Saudis. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to meet with President Xi because President Xi was finalizing a comprehensive strategic partnership with the president of Azerbaijan. And people may say, well, what the heck that got to do with anything? Well, it should be seen that Azerbaijan is supposed to be part of the Organization of Turkic States, whose stated goal by 2040 is to form a one-nation alliance from Turkey all the way potentially to Mongolia. But in this case, the president of Azerbaijan took what I euphemistically call the Pakistan Pledge, which was expressing allegiance not only continuing to do so to the Belt and Road Initiative, but also praising greatly the other three Chinese global initiatives, those on security, development, and civilization. So there are lots and lots of other developments going on across the world. And as I have said previously, Ukraine is increasingly resembling a skirmish on the edge of empire.
Yep, and you can follow all on Weaponized News, and you really, really should. Thank you, Simon, from Weaponized News, bringing us up to date on the diplomatic swirl. Let's go to Iowa, where Elaine has a view on Donald Trump. Let's hear it. Elaine, welcome to the show. Go ahead, please.
I think Trump is hated to America. I think he's going to take us to World War III. I really hate him. I hate him with a passion.
And why do you think he's a traitor? On whose behalf?
I think January 6th said it all. I think in January 6th he put the thing up to America.
The protest against the rigged election you're talking about, that's what makes him a traitor?
Rigged? How do you say it's rigged? Trump lost. It wasn't rigged.
Well, you say that. There's lots of credible evidence that There's lots of credible evidence that he didn't actually lose, but it's immaterial now because he's back. You could make an argument that Trump is a traitor to America first by virtue of his slavish obeisance to a foreign power, namely Netanyahu's Israel. What do you think about that, Elaine?
I think he stole this election with Elon Musk.
Say that again?
I think he stole this election with Elon Musk.
Yeah, you're not a fan of Elon Musk either, no?
No. No, I'm not a fan
of
some people.
Me too. I'm suing him in the High Court in Dublin. Case is coming up very soon. But he's leaving the government. So he's leaving the government. So who are you going to blame then?
I'm going to blame Trump forever.
Okay, another Trumper. Elaine in Iowa, thanks very much for joining us. Now, you know that I have another show in the week. It goes out on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Last night's was a cracker. It's called Have It Out with Galloway, and you can be on it. Here's how. Join me on Have It Out with Galloway. Be on the studio wall. Participate in the debate about the greatest issues of our time. This is the place where we tackle the world's biggest problems and offer some of the world's best answers. You can have your say. Write to me at our website at haveitoutwithgalloway.com and join me here in the studio audience.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Let's stay in Florida. Why, who wouldn't? And we'll talk with Eves, another wise man from that Sunshine State. Go ahead, Eve.
Thank you for having me on your show. I wanted to make the following comment about Ukraine. Europe wants to wage war against Russia, and together with the United States, they lost it, and now they want to keep going without United States. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that they want Ukraine to keep an army of 800,000 people, which is about a budget of $150 or $100 billion a year, because it's about $100,000 per soldier, and in a country of 15 million. So those are two absurd positions. Now, I want to assume that the Europeans are sane, the leaders are sane. So they must have another project which is better than losing the war in Ukraine. In other words, they must have something which writes out the war in Ukraine, and they say it's still better to maintain it. And in the situation of France, I see very well what they have in mind. What they have in mind is that they, just like if you take, for instance, the unification of Germany, if you want to unify Europe, you need a boogeyman. And the boogeyman is going to be Russia. So Russia is going to be the instrument, even though they are at war with them, even though they're going to lose the war, is going to boogeyman who allows Europe to be made to bail out France. France has $3.5 trillion of debt, and they need to have Germany in particular and Netherlands and those countries which are in better shape to bail France out. And the deal is that they take the war in Ukraine, they take the war against Russia, they built their Europe because of that, because politically they can say that they have to be Europe to oppose Russia, and this what explains this completely insane politic. That's the point I wanted to make.
Yeah, you made it well. It's a good one. I mean, I'm struggling, but then I'm increasingly struggling. As I get older, I understand less about certain things. I have no idea, for example, why the whole world, whole Western world, is in a state of such complete infatuation with a small country on the Mediterranean of only 7 or 8 million people. Everything in the world is bent towards that infatuation. Our own liberties are shredded, our own freedoms are destroyed, our own social peace and calm is threatened. Our relations with the 1.7 billion Muslims in the world are imperiled by that policy. I don't understand that. I know all kinds of people say they do understand it, and this or that plan or this or that conspiracy theory is the reason, but I don't really buy it. I don't understand why France, riven with debt, riven with social, cultural, religious division, having to jail the principal opposition leader, having to deny the results of a parliamentary election that the government itself called, can possibly imagine that the Grande Armée of Napoleon Macron is going to fare better than the Grande Armée under Napoleon Bonaparte. Yves, help me. How?
I'm going to help you on the math side. France has a 3.5 trillion deficit, and a lot of Europe own the debt. Now, if France go from AA to simple A and B and all that, it can be 5% interest rate difference to serve a debt of 3.5 trillion. So what is 1% of 3.5 trillion? It's 35 billion. What's 5%? It's 175 billion a year, assuming that Europe owes the debt. This is cheap compared to a war that they don't even wage. They give some money right now to Ukraine, but France doesn't give $100 billion to Ukraine. France gives maybe 20 billion to Ukraine. So if they can have the German and France and serving out the debt and have much lower interest rate, France would send maybe some foreign legions, and like their name implies, foreign is not French. So, those heroic French, first they send the Ukrainian, and then they send the people from the foreign legion, and then they tell the German that they have to incorporate French debt into the whole debt. And this is maybe one of the reasoning that they are doing. I'm not telling you that it's a good one, but it must be one of the things is that they want to make to lower the payment they make and all that, and as they say, after all, Ukraine is not that expensive.
Beau geste. Thank you very much indeed, Yves in Florida. Now my good wife Gayatri joins me with the social media news roundup. What's rattling, Gayatri?
Let's start with Papa Francisco. What a sad day it was. Easter Monday, waking up to the news that His Holiness the Pope Francis died. And it came as quite a shock too, did it not? Because he had no intention of resigning, so he would have carried on, unlike the previous Pope. As you said, he was special and very different in many ways, almost revolutionary, like Jesus you suggested before. And Cynthia, in the comments, made a comment that it hurts without him, and she's right. Pope Francis is gone too soon. And this makes our visit that we made to the Vatican last year even more special.
Very special, yeah, and very lucky
feel
for us that we did get to meet him.
We went
less than 12 months ago.
Yeah, it was. I feel very honored and blessed. We went with the all-party parliamentary group for the Holy See.
He loved your fingernail. Have we told people that? Oh, you've got it back. Show the camera. He was enchanted with Gayatri's Palestine flag fingernail, and also about our mutual friend, Ambassador Alicia Castro, the former Argentine ambassador to the UK and many other places, and still a good friend of ours. And she was the only person we've ever known that had the Pope in Rome on the phone. She had him on speed dial.
Exactly. So may God grant Papa Francisco paradise.
Amen.
And as you said, he had a very special relation with the Palestinians. And on that subject...
And with the Arabs. Were you not surprised that the bishop... I had no idea that Francis had visited quite so many Arab and Muslim countries.
He had made quite an impact. And Elaine from Brighton writes on that subject. He says, why did Israeli Defense Minister visit Lamy last week? What for? He always assured us by condemning Israel's atrocities and working towards a two-state solution and peace. Was it a meeting to keep the genocide going? I think so. And since the meeting, bombs are being targeted on mass groups of civilians every day and burning whole families alive. It's awful, it's sick, and incredibly sad and inhumane. Where are the outraged voices? Why are we still friends with these genociders? Why? And the despair in Elaine's letter is very poignant, isn't it? And it's shared by millions. I mean, today...
Did you see those twin girls today?
Today, they were out of 37 who were killed. We can't display it because it's too graphic. These twins are 4-year-old Saba and Sana Abu Saif, and they were killed by shelling in East Buresh. And it's... please don't let it normalize our life. We have to maintain...
That's the danger. You see, when only the alternative media, independent media, is even referring to these crimes, is never mind showing the results of these crimes, then the audience on alternative media has become, I think, somewhat stunned by it, and stunned by our apparent impotence. I mean, how many times can your heart break? And how many times can you say, this must stop, when you know that it isn't going to stop and you don't have the power to stop it?
Yes, and as you say, we just don't understand why. Why? What for this small strip along the Mediterranean Sea?
Yeah. I mean, none of the theories about why quite does it for me. All of them may have some part to play, but none of them really explain why. In the US Department of Health, your cancer research will be stopped if you say on Facebook that there should be a boycott of Israel. Nobody can quite explain why. The New York Times, the Washington Post, the London Times, the Daily Telegraph, all the big papers of the Western world all did obituaries on the Pope, and not one of them referred to his preoccupation with Gaza and the genocide.
No, not one. It was too risky for them, isn't it?
Yeah.
Opening up the subject and therefore revealing a way for people to find out more of what's happening if they did not know already. Sadness all round. More war, death and destruction in the Ukraine war. We're asking this week, will there be a Russia-Ukraine peace deal? And Nakajima Films...
20,554 people voted in the end, and the result was about 88% said no. And they're surely right.
Yeah, not much trust in what's going on, isn't it? Especially if participants and the host itself just walk away from the table.
When Lamy invites you to London and then he walks out too, you know it's a fiasco.
Fiasco it is. So Nakajima Films is amongst those who voted no, due to the fact that France and Great Britain hate Russia. Their governments want to steal all the resources of Russia, so they are encouraging the entire population of France and Great Britain, Ukraine to die to protect the drug addict Zelensky. Now, this brought me to a picture that we saw earlier today. Well, we saw it in real life when we were in London earlier, and saw right opposite the Russian embassy, which had been there from the beginning, really, a road sign that says Kiev Road.
Oh, yeah. I never actually saw it, did you?
Yes.
Oh, my goodness, it's an official City of Westminster. So they unilaterally changed Bayswater Road to Kiev Road.
Yes, not officially, because the maps.
They've even spelled it wrongly.
They spelled it wrongly. Yes, they spelled Kiev with Kyiv instead of Kiev.
They never heard of Chicken Kiev.
Exactly.
They never consulted an English atlas in the City of Westminster Council.
Yeah. So that road sign was erected in 2023. Along after they had painted that street outside the Russian embassy with the yellow and blue.
Yeah, and the IKEA colours.
Yeah, and
at least that's gone.
Yeah, that's gone, luckily. But this one is still there. And I was thinking, okay, so there was obviously so much uproar about it then. But what about now? I mean, how often did we raise the matter of Ukrainian refugees welcome here, and how there would be a lady behind the kiosk at the airports and the ports welcoming those refugees. Prior to the war in Ukraine, there were like 18,000 Ukrainians living in the UK, and since it's over 217. So that's
217,000
217,000.
If you add Ireland to that, and we've had some experience. Of that, that number is probably matched in Ireland, and in any case, Ireland is only 5 million people. So as a proportion of the Irish, the Ukrainians are now mega big, and they're not that popular. I mean, they're not that popular anywhere. They're not that popular in Poland, not least because they massacred a lot of Poles in their alliance in Western Ukraine with Hitler. But because of the profusion of Rolls Royces, Bentleys, Lamborghinis and the rest that they brought with them, along with their big money, when they fled Ukraine and now live in Poland. In the Baltic states, the policy of giving houses to Ukrainian refugees has now been discontinued. So there's a deep ambiguity, you could say schizophrenia, about Ukraine. And I predicted to the audience before, let me do it again, in 5 years' time, Ukrainians will be the most unpopular people in Europe. Bookmark it, mark my words, and tell me if I'm wrong, if I'm still here.
Palestinian refugees welcome? Anyone? No?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, you see, the blatant racism of it. A column, a corridor at the airport. Ukrainians, welcome here. Here's a house, here's money. No questions asked. But if you are a Palestinian British citizen who's got a relative who needs urgent life-saving treatment that you're prepared to pay for, you are automatically refused a visa. Yes. For your relative.
And this is what angers us so much. This is what pains us so much, the hypocrisy of it. So onwards, Perkins says, no, he answers, the US wants it to continue. It's just that Europe is becoming the new proxy. I don't know, yes and no, because did you see US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth? He said that the United States can no longer serve as Europe's sole security guarantor. He says, this has passed, it's long overdue.
Well, we'd be glad to see the back of them. But there is a school of thought. The most respectable proponent of it is our friend Brian Belichick, who believes that this is all a maneuver. that Russia is not really making up, the US is not really making up with Russia, doesn't really intend for the war to end, but it's a blind basically, so that the US can now concentrate on China, although that's less persuasive now that Trump
they
is...
received a discount, haven't they?
Trump is on his knees to China. Maybe he'll be accused of being a Chinese agent next. So, but it's a case. It's a school of thought. It's not a ridiculous one, but I don't myself buy it. I'm not persuaded by it. I think the U.S., President Trump, really does want to see an end to the Ukraine war for whatever bewildering series of reasons. It's genuine, and I think he's bent Rubio and the rest of his departments to that task. And the Europeans are going to be left whistling for Dixie.
Well, I'm going to leave it at that, so
okay,
we can go on to our
time's
last
running. We've got to get out
call.
for chips right after this last call from Terence in England, in Corby, on the Pope. Go ahead, Del, go ahead.
Hey, Mr. Galloway, and 2 points. First point, when he first became Holy Father, I thought to myself, goodness, we've got a Jesuit at last. No money, no greed, no nothing.
Yep, me too.
No self-envy, nothing. And the biggest thing that came after that was 2 days later, a friend who's from Chile said to me that Christina Kirchner, when told of his pontificate, she gave him the greatest compliment of all time. She said, not him again. What a fantastic compliment to the great man he was. Feed your hungry, clothe your naked, cure and shelter your people who have nowhere to go. On to a point you then made about the growth in the Catholic faith. I'm not an apostle. I just happen to be a human who is a Roman Catholic and practices my faith, and I believe thou shalt not kill. But you said about the youngsters, and in a couple of days' time, Carlo Acutis, made Saint Carlo Acutis. He was a young man who died at 15 in 2000. He was an expert on, obviously, as he loved his faith, telecommunications, and the second miracle, scientifically, objectively been proven, Holy Father Pope Francis canonized him, and he's due to be St. Carlo Acutis. Maybe you have a look at that, and back to the Holy Father.
I will. I didn't know that story, Terence, and I have made the slip twice on air, not tonight, calling him Saint Francis rather than Pope Francis, but I genuinely hope that his canonization is not long delayed, and I suspect it will not be. That's the last call of the evening, because it's the witching hour and my missus is needing her chips. So if you'll forgive me, I'll close the show. Wish you every happiness until we meet again, not next Sunday, by which time we will have watched what will be the most watched papal funeral of all time. And I think it's going to be an impressive sight. I'll be watching. I'll be in Doncaster speaking on Friday night, and I'll be in Runcorn speaking on Saturday afternoon. Hope to see you there. Bye.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.